Please welcome the manager of solutions engineering team at Restaurant365, Kevin McTigue. Welcome, Kevin.
Thanks, Tosh. Super happy to be here.
You are like McTigue as in tiger.
You got it.
That's great. And I'm proud to introduce our star of the show, a young CEO. It's crazy, his story, who challenges the status quo in everything he does. He's very results driven, people focused leader. We'll get into that. And he's always raising the bar for the industry. He owns and operates 28 tropical smoothie cafes with another, get this, 25 in development. And he employs over 500 employees, investments in hospitality, management, real estate, another CPA by trade. Please welcome the CEO of Serve Hospitality Group, Salem Najjar. Welcome, Salem.
Thanks, guys, for having me. I'm excited to talk with you all today.
All right. So what's your favorite smoothie?
I don't know what you got there. Mine's the Detox Island Green, but I customize it. I like to do whey protein and chia seeds. So those are my favorite go-to on the detox.
Well, you're the big boss. You're the CEO, so you can probably ask them to customize any beverage. That is awesome. Well, why don't we just jump in? Why don't you tell us a little bit high level about Serve, and I'll do the same thing with Kevin to explain Restaurant365. So take it away, Salem. Tell us about Serve.
Yeah, I don't know where to begin. It's a long story, but basically, I grew up in retail. My father did convenience stores and gas stations, and I learned to love that business from a young age. And I went off to become a CPA, actually. So I went to University of Michigan and then went off to Deloitte. And then I opened up a CPA practice where I started servicing franchise clients. And that was my real first taste of the franchise industry. And I liked how I could see the path for retail merging on sort of a scalable level. So I started looking at franchises, and I came across Tropical Smoothie, which that's a long story in and of itself. And we can get into what I looked for there and why I chose that brand later in the conversation. But basically, I just signed up more as a passive investment. I was thinking I'll own a few of these while I run my CPA firm. And another big story, that's not the way it goes. You're either all in or you're not. So it took over my life really quickly. And I made the decision to offload my book of business and vertically integrate. So we do everything in-house, from the accounting to the HR, payroll, marketing, and that allows us to keep a really tight lid on everything. And Serve was born, Serve Hospitality Group, which is my company. It's an acronym. It stands for Strive for Others, or Strive for Excellence, Elevate Others, Results Driven, Visionary Leadership, and Exceed Expectations. And that was kind of born when I decided that I was going to expand. I wanted to just have a real clear mission and vision for what I was trying to do and where I was trying to go, and rather than just continue to open franchise units and not have a clear path. So Serve was born.
Wow, that is wonderful. So Kevin, give us a little bit of that, the story of Restaurant365, your role there, and a little bit about what you all do.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of y'all who aren't familiar with us, Restaurant365 started in right around 2011. Our founder's vision was to really start a company that did restaurant-specific accounting. They were doing a lot of client services for accounting and found there really wasn't a great accounting specifics or restaurant specific accounting solution on the marketplace at that time, and really set out to change that, right? And to deliver something that restaurant owners and operators could really use to help better manage their business. So since Salem mentioned kind of the logic behind his name, Restaurant365, sometimes we hear people say, shouldn't it be 360 if you guys are all encompassing? And no, the answer is it's 365 because that's how many days there are in a year. And we all know that in the restaurant industry, there's really never a day off. Maybe if you're lucky, you're closed on Christmas and one other major holiday. But otherwise, restaurant operators and owners are working around the clock. And we are working to serve restaurant owners and operators around that same clock. So we started on the accounting side of things, but really grew our business model to encompass all sorts of other restaurant management needs. We started by expanding first into inventory management and doing things around food costing, recipe management, and actual versus theoretical food cost analysis. We then expanded into the labor management side of things as we kind of worked our way down the P&L and looked at opportunities to help restaurant owners manage the four walls and improve profitability. So labor was that next logical step to sort of figure out, how do we help with scheduling and sales forecasting and staffing models that allow you to get real lifetime reporting that tells you, am I properly staffed, or do I need to make adjustments on the fly? Most recently, we've expanded into the payroll offerings. So we, in the same way that we recognized there really wasn't a restaurant specific accounting platform back in 2011, a couple of years ago, we recognized there really wasn't a restaurant specific payroll solution out there. And we talked to a lot of customers that weren't happy with their payroll company or provider. So we're really trying to make sure that we bring in a full circle ERP for restaurants, a one-stop shop. We can certainly customize our offerings and do, one piece or the other, but a lot of our clients really enjoy the notion of being able to say, hey, I've got everything I need with one single point of contact, from reporting to business management to personnel management. And that really allows them to stay focused on the front of house, right? Because that's really our goal, is to make sure that you're doing as little time in the kind of not fun admin work that most restaurant operators don't get into the business for, and to really stay focused on the thing that, really draws everyone to this industry, which is that customer experience. And I've been with Restaurant365 now for almost 3 years. Prior to that, as Taj mentioned, I was an end user of the platform as a CFO and controller, and was really just thrilled with what it was able to help us do with our business in terms of realizing profitability, scaling up our growth, and really best servicing our operators and our leadership to drive the results that they needed and that they wanted.
Wow, that's very helpful. It's great context. So both CPA, CFO roles, and I think from your perspective, Salem, what was it that triggered in your mind to get into franchising? And I mean, I love your ethos, right? The acronym of what SERVE stands for. Tell us a little bit about those triggers that said, I want to build a system that is definitely people and process oriented and bottom line oriented, but also technology. So weave that into how you began, because I think you're wired quite differently and very creatively. I'd love to have you share that story.
Yeah, begin with the end in mind, right? So when I sat down and realized, like, okay, I'm going to offload this accounting practice. I mean, the first step for me was realizing that I wanted to maintain everything vertically integrated. As a CPA, I can tell you from experience that clients are so used to mistreating, accounting and a lot of their systems and processes in a bad way. So I was dealing with customers that want to pay you $200, $300 a month for, bookkeeping, and it's garbage in, garbage out. And it's very reactive instead of proactive. And I hated that. I was super detail oriented. I wanted to know, when costs were going up, when profitability was going down, why it was going down, so that I could have a really good pulse on it. So that's kind of where really studying the accounting side of things and staying vertically integrated came about. And then the vision of developing the company with a good set of core values that are embedded in the name was part of the vision, to make sure that I was building something that people could grow with me in. So having a nice ethos that we could follow, a mission statement and a purpose that would allow us to grow the company, and kind of have some checks and balances with ourselves of saying, hey, what is it we're doing? I mean, in the restaurant industry, as Kevin mentioned, we get so bogged down with just, having our head down, working 365 days a year, maybe 1 or 2 days off if you're lucky. And so it's important to not just have your head down in this industry, and to try to look at, what your goal is. And for us, you mentioned it earlier in my intro, but the reason we exist, our purpose, is to raise the bar and inspire others to do the same. And for us, what that really means is we're not just looking at being the largest, or, having the most units, or having the most brands. We're very intentional about the brands that we partner with, the technology partners that we partner with, because we want to be the best. We want to be the best in class, and we want to have, highest EBITDAs, highest sales volumes, best customer service scores, all that stuff. So all that's kind of played into how we've evolved over time. And so as we grow, we try to be very thoughtful and strategic about those kind of things.
Wonderful. Well, the things that you hit on are probably the very reason that Blackstone acquired Tropical Smoothie for $2 billion, right? That transaction just closed, say, about a month or so ago. And everything you're talking about, it's being poised for growth, comp store sales, high EBITDA, the growth mindset. I mean, it seems like is there a shift that you're seeing in the marketplace as it relates to private equity getting more involved and seeing the winners and having a technology platform of different types that helps you all succeed? Talk about
Yeah,
that.
it's exciting. For franchisees, the Blackstone news came, and there's not really a clear answer in terms of what we're going to see the benefits out of it. I mean, they're a big company with a lot of great resources behind them, so we're very excited and hopeful that they'll be a good partner for the brand. On the franchisee side, we haven't seen anything yet. As you mentioned, it's only been about, I want to say, a month and a half. So
Yeah.
we're in the initial discussions. I sit on a few committees: the profitability committee, the ops committee, even the technology committee, and we're starting to see some resources come up that we may be able to tap into: better buying power, better strategic vision on how we can grow the brand and sustain the brand long term. So nothing quite yet that's been put in place, but a lot of early conversations. So I'm excited.
Well, that's good. Kevin, I'll turn the baton over to you. You probably have some questions for Salem, so I'll have you take it away.
I certainly do. So, I mean, Salem, you mentioned that while the Blackstone acquisition maybe kind of was a big headline and definitely sort of sent shivers throughout the system, and some people reacted in different ways. I mean, what in the context of kind of knowing what they bring to the table and in terms of, bigger purchasing power and everything that, can really benefit you and your brand, what were some of your more personal focuses this year when you kind of thought about, like, certainly the acquisition is big and that's a big headline, but like we need to stay focused on XYZ that we really want to execute on here and now in 2024?
Yeah, it's like trying to balance between what we can control and what we can be hopeful for on the horizon with our planning, right? So I think, for me, the only concern was, is this a growth focused? We've always the brand that I'm in, Tropical Smoothie, has always been owned by private equity. Not always, it's been owned by private equity for many years, but different size private equity shops. And so each one had their different goal and their different focus. And I think Blackstone is really looking to, help the brand become the even larger national player that it deserves to be. I think we're at 1,500 plus units nationwide right now. I'm one of the larger operators in the Midwest. And for me, once I knew that, this is a growth focused partner, that's really all that was important to me. And then from there, I just go back to doing what I do well and just staying focused on my business and my lane and trying to accomplish my company's mission, continue to grow units, grow sales, grow profitability, and be a top tier performer in my industry.
Yeah. So the word cleanup year, I think, came up a few weeks ago. What does that mean? Like,
yeah, we were talking about, if I recall, we were talking about how this year, what does my growth look like? Last year, I was on a panel for the multi-unit franchise conference, and somebody in the audience asked me how many locations was I up to and how many did I open? And I told them that I had opened 7 last year, and all my company has been organic growth. I think we've only had 4 acquisitions. And so we're just naturally building out our territory and bootstrapping a lot of our growth. But this year for us was really about, with the economic climate, and there isn't a lot of new development going on. So as I mentioned earlier, we're vertically integrated. We started doing some real estate deals ourselves, building freestanding drive-throughs. But while real estate is a little bit slower this year, we kind of made it a strategic goal to pause a little bit and recalibrate, both at the office with our tech stack and with our processes and procedures and with our team. So we expanded so rapidly in prior years that we needed to get, the infrastructure in place with the operations team. So we brought on a great director of operations for our bigger market in Illinois and Wisconsin. We hired some strong district managers. We hired some key players here at the office, like a director of finance, a financial controller. And so these hires have needed some time to calibrate. And so we wanted to be mindful of the fact that we can't just keep grow. We did a lot of growth to build out, the revenue that we needed to be able to lay the foundation for hiring internally and bringing on the right team. But now we want to pause. We want to get everything calibrated the right way with our tech stack, with our operations team, with our processes and procedures, so that as we continue to catapult forward, we'll be primed for growth. And that's also why, I mentioned earlier, I chose certain tech partners, right? So when I joined Restaurant365, when I joined Leasecake, these were done, very intentionally early, so if my focus is to grow and finish building out these 25 to 30 tropical smoothies, potentially have some acquisitions, I could easily get up to 50, 60 units in that brand. And I wanted to have everything ready to go so that I'm not working backwards later to have the right tech, or the right people or the right processes and procedures.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there that you said that resonated with me and kind of my past experience as well, right? Like I've worked with private equity partners in high growth environments, and like you said, it's critically important that you're getting the right people in place, but also getting the right systems in place to set yourself up for growth. For those of us who have worked with private equity partners, we know that they're very sophisticated investors and they can be very metrics driven, and it's really important to know that you have the right tools and systems in place to measure yourself against your metrics and to give guidance to your operators as you're kind of recalibrating and resetting strategy for the growth now and the growth beyond. I'm curious, Salem, in light of kind of the fact that the theme of our webinar here today is maximizing profitability and efficiency, and you talked a lot about those investments that you made into your tech stack. How do you think about profitability and driving efficiency and improving those metrics? And what systems or metrics or reports are you leveraging to reach those goals?
Yeah. The first thing that I want to blurt out is just like, there's no silver bullet. I think
Yeah.
what makes somebody world class, whether it's a franchise operator, an athlete, anything, is doing a lot of small things right. So for when I think about, being best in class or being a best performer in this industry specifically, and even more specifically in the brand that I operate in, it's all those pillars of like good customer service, good speed of service, good profitability, good employee culture, low turnover, right? So it's all those little things done right. And so the only way to do them right is to constantly refine them and improve them over time. So when it comes to profitability specifically, we're always looking at, how do we grow sales in an intentional, mindful way? Because that cures a lot of problems with profitability, but you want to do it in a way that is sustainable and will get you customer retention and things like that. And then while we're doing that, and this plays into exactly why I've kept things vertically integrated internally, is paying attention to where the expenses are going, right? So in the beginning, I found that I was paying probably much more in G&A overhead with my administrative team than maybe some of my peers who were outsourcing a lot of their bookkeeping, or just doing kind of like the bare bones, bookkeeper for a low price every month, et cetera. But as I've scaled and grown, I've seen it pay dividends, right? So as we're paying attention more to catching something even as small as alerts for when our internet contracts have expired, and now we're paying attention to, okay, well, that's a simple phone call to the internet company and tell them like, hey, you just increased my bill to $250 a month. I need you to renew me back down to $150 a month. You extrapolate that over a lot of locations, it adds up, right? So that's a really, really small example. And then the bigger examples are obviously in our prime costs, which are the, food and labor. And so the more that we've been able to dive into where's our food going, where's our food waste at, where can we improve our training, where can we calibrate our labor, that's really where we've seen it pay the biggest dividends.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense in terms of the yield, like you said there on the dividends. And I think that's where people's focus goes a lot of the times initially, right? Is like focusing on the four walls. What are the metrics that we can really measure and manage against? And painting a balanced scorecard picture, right? Where you're not focused on the one metric that you think is the most important, but recognizing that, year-over-year sales growth is great, but also so are customer reviews and online satisfaction scores that are more of a leading than a lagging indicator, and making sure that, yeah, we're keeping food costs down, but we're also ensuring proper portion sizes, and that we're keeping labor costs down, but we're also optimally staffed when people walk in the door. And I think to your point, like those are some of the ones that kind of bubble up to the surface for operators first and foremost. And what sometimes is an afterthought is those overhead costs, right? That the things that you're doing administratively, where you make those decisions on the cost value benefit of saying, I want to have this vertically integrated, I want to have it in-house because they're going to be, a little bit more eye on the prize and a little bit more focused on our business than an outsourced provider who's going to be, obviously servicing multiple clients. And I think that, we've certainly seen that in our partnership with Leasecake, that sometimes lease administration is not exactly the kind of thing that restaurant owners and operators get into the business for, but it's a critically important area of your business for understanding who's responsible for which costs, where your escalations are coming from, where your opportunities are for new growth, and how you should be negotiating your new lease and new real estate spaces.
Yeah, and piggybacking off of that, I'll say two more things. One, on the tech stack, what I love about both the Restaurant 365 tool and the Leasecake tool is that you don't have to be vertically integrated to use them. So I have a lot of peers and friends that use these platforms that, may not have as much administrative staff as I have, but it's great to be able to have that accuracy even with your external partners, whether it's your CPA or your bookkeeper or, a legal advisor that's helping, oversee your leases. And so we can get into more of how I've also leveraged Leasecake later in this conversation about how I've leveraged that to help improve profitability, because it's not just for me. I've leveraged it in a way where I'm not just using it as a tool for knowing when I need to renew my leases or when my term is up or whatever, but I've also really leaned into it heavily, especially this year on my triple net and CAM reconciliations, where I've been able to realize a big savings.
Yeah. Well, I love your analogy. I mean, given that the Olympics is going on, and it is a whole series of little things that you have to be excellent at to be world class. And from that standpoint, if you take a look at like all of those other little things you were talking about, vendor contracts that you don't want to have renewed on an auto renew cycle, right? We've got customers that went cashless 3 years ago, and the Brinks truck still shows up because they weren't able to get out of their 3-year Brinks contract. So there's no cash, and it just costs them tens of thousands of dollars. On the CAM and tax audit things, I think there was some numbers that you all ran, right? Was it like 36,000 for all of your stores in 1 year alone, something like that, Salem?
Yeah. So that's a big one. About 3-4 years ago, I really started to, leverage my internal team to really scrub the CAM reconciliations as they were coming through, because I said, there's got to be some low hanging fruit here with some cost savings. I learned a long time ago some key things to put in my leases, like 3 to 5% CAM cap, non-cumulative, certain expenses that are controllable versus non-controllable, certain administrative fees that are allowed and not allowed, right? So as I've improved my lease negotiation over the years and really buttoned up what's acceptable and what's not acceptable for a landlord to charge, we got really intentional a few years ago about kind of auditing those things as they come through. And so before Leasecake, it was an extremely manual and gruesome process. I think I had an Excel spreadsheet where I would write, key clauses from real estate leases, like, there's a 5% CAM cap, and we would do some, analysis to try to calculate if there, what was our percent increase in trash this year over last year. Since Leasecake, we've automated all of that. So yeah, the $36,000 number is out of my 28 locations. We were able to realize that in savings this year from my 2023 triple nets, which is wild. Like most people don't even really look at those, but I had my controller get really diligent about entering in all of the information. And so sometimes it's just a flat out miscalculation. Like we've had some landlords accidentally charge us an administrative fee on all CAM for the entire plaza rather than just pro rata, for us. And sometimes it's not intentional. It's just they have, bookkeeper doing garbage in, garbage out, and they're passing along expenses and we're paying the brunt of it, right? Or sometimes it's a matter of just challenging them. Like, hey, why is our trash expense 115% higher this year than it was last year? Like you got to go back and renegotiate with your trash vendors because this is affecting us as tenants. So having all that data there and having it be able to calculate for you and, just really put things in perspective of where things are hurting can really help, especially when you're launching in, new markets. It may not sound like, $1, $2 a square foot can make that much of a difference, but as you saw with that number, it adds up, and
Yeah.
it's really meaningful on some of our newer locations where we're just breaking into a new market, and we really need to keep expenses tight as we build revenues.
Yeah. Well, it's like death by a thousand cuts, because if you look at these things that just become almost tedious, right? They're taking your eye off building your restaurant brand and your restaurant empire. You're like, you know what? I think that number's right. We'll just go ahead and go with that. But if you start to, compound that 36,000 in savings over the average life of all of your portfolio, let's just say you don't have that mindset. It's a $400,000 number. I mean, it's nothing to sneeze at, especially when you've got brand refreshes coming up. So it's hard-earned cash that if you don't have the right tools, like what Restaurant365 offers and how our CAM and tax rec capabilities are, like these are things that are the thousand cuts that inevitably will leak into profitability long term. Like we say, oh, 50 cents extra per, rent per square foot, or $1 or $2 rent per square foot. Yeah, that sucks, and I'll sign it. But you know what? That's going to impact your multiple year options. So I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah, and I mean, if I can jump in here, right? We did not have Leasecake when I was in Salem's shoes, and so when it came to time to actually reconcile these triple net, these real estate kind of submissions that we were getting from landlords, you would really kind of only approach it with like a cost benefit analysis of your time, right? Where you would say like, look, I have a million other projects to do as an accountant, as a controller, as a CFO. Do I really have the time right now to like dig through this and to ask for supporting documentation and to see all of their expenses and proof of payment and look at the pro rata calculations and make sure that it's correct? And essentially, we would only really do it if it was a large enough increase year over year, right? Like that was the flag for us. It's like, wait a minute, like, our reconciliation was $2,000, $4,000. Like, how did we really kind of miss it by that much in terms of the estimates throughout the course of the year? But if it was like under $1,000, we just kind of chalk it up to like, yeah, whatever. Like, nobody's perfect, can't estimate it. It is what it is. But why would we then turn around and worry about somebody spending an extra 15 minutes in the restaurant and, the labor costs associated with that, and overtime because it's a more tenured person who's getting extra hours, or, making sure that our food cost variance is less than 0.5%, right? That we're executing at 95% accuracy. Like we apply all this scrutiny to the four walls, and meanwhile, we're letting money walk out the door with these reconciliations because they're just, at our time, wasn't a great tool to kind of tackle that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting how, I just was talking about this death by a thousand cuts, but the moment that you say, you know what, this tolerance of an error, maybe it's a 1% or 2%, it's kind of within that margin of error, and you just kind of like, I'll forget about it. It starts to really, really add up. And I think, Salem, you touched on something, and you've got a completely a different mindset. I don't say different like, no one else has your skills, but I think you've got a component of real estate smarts, legal smarts, accounting smarts, and tech smarts. So when you talk about the types of provisions that you would rather have in your real estate leases to reduce your risk, are you seeing potentially how we could start to move the market into more tenant-friendly leases where now you have a little bit more of that power? Is that even like fathomable or achievable, or are these kinds of steps?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I think there's definitely ways that we can make things more tenant friendly, by just knowing where to add pressure, right? I mean, for these landlords, especially in today's environment. I mean, I'm doing, like I said, vertically integrated. I'm doing some deals myself, and I know what it takes to put it together a real estate deal, right? And so whether it's from a financing perspective or being able to capitalize out of your project later, you're looking at, things like the strength of the tenant, the guarantee, the rent that you're getting per square foot, right? And I think it's in everyone's best interest for a tenant to be sustainable in the space for as long as possible, right? So it's not just about saving money, it's about maximizing, profitability for the franchisee, for the tenant, right? So that they can stay there longer, that they can pay longer. So it's a win-win for everybody. And I think, some small things that really don't hurt the landlord, but can make a pretty significant impact in especially a growing restaurant business in a new market, can really move the needle. So yeah, I think you just got to know what is important to pressure on. I mean, you're going to look at market comps and do the basic standard stuff for like what's reasonable to pay in square feet and how can we forecast sales of what we'll do here. But to Kevin's point earlier, you don't want to just chalk everything up to like, it's $1,000 here, $1,000 there, $50 here, $50 there. That ties into everything. So a lot of small things done right. I mean, you got to be careful about your tech stack too. You don't want to have 20 apps on your phone that you're paying $100 a month for how many subscriptions, and then you're wasting money on your triple net reconciliations and you don't know where to, save money on your profitability. It's like, it all really, really adds up. And by the time you're done, it's like 3-4% of your bottom line.
Yeah. There's a question that's come across asking about AI. AI is obviously an important, very relevant topic. Are you seeing the use of AI within your system, Salem? Are you applying any of those capabilities for your real estate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, super cool what's happening right now with AI in our industry specifically. So Leasecake, as you well know, as the founder, Taj, you guys do a great job with what you've labeled your cake bot. So what's really cool about Leasecake is that I can upload pretty much any document in any format that I want to Leasecake, and then it somehow converts it into a readable file, and I can just talk to it like a human. So I could say, hey, when is my lease due for renewal, or a lot of times I'll negotiate. Another big one is HVAC. I'll negotiate, how much up to a certain dollar amount every year I'm responsible for paying in like routine HVAC maintenance, because it's a material capital improvement for the building, and how much is the landlord's responsibility. So there will be so many times that I'll just pull up CakeBot and be like, hey, who's responsible if the HVAC breaks down, or who's responsible if there's a leak in the roof, or who's responsible for maintaining the parking lot, and it'll just, spit out the answer. So that saved us countless hours. It's also been really helpful for when I come up for lease renewal options, is I'm really looking at, okay, go back, check out historically, what I've spent in this space, what I've invested in this space, and try to negotiate with the landlord from there. On the Restaurant 365 thing, I think Kevin can talk better about that than I can. I haven't yet delved into the AI tools and features that they have, but we've definitely used it in a lot of other parts of our industry. There's some cool technology I'm looking at right now with cameras where you can integrate AI with your camera system and say, hey, show me the moment in time where that $200 void happened. And so there's a lot of cool stuff happening in the industry. I think it's going to be very different outlook 5 years from now on how AI plays into the restaurant industry.
Yeah, I don't want to give anything away. My marketing department will get a little upset with me. We've got some pretty exciting news around AI coming next week at our big major national event for R365. But what I will say is that, I think there's a really great spot for AI in the theme of this webinar, right? Which is maximizing profitability and efficiency in terms of leveraging AI for financial analysis, right? There's a lot of people who are looking at AI and all of its large language learning model capabilities to do things like analyzing a 150-page lease and abstracting the key findings from it, or using it to generate content on social media to drive content for internal posts and things of that nature. And one area where I think people are just starting to realize the capabilities of what AI can do is in trend analysis in your operational metrics and in your financial metrics. So, if I was an FP&A person, I might be a little nervous because there's a lot of really cool tech out there right now where you can just upload financial statements and it's going to give you key insights in a matter of seconds that say, hey, this location is trending down in terms of flow through. This location's traffics and comps are not indicative of the greater trade area, and you might have a customer service issue that you need to tackle. And so, like I said, there's some exciting stuff coming kind of on that front in R365, but I do kind of encourage everybody on this webinar and in the industry to, be really open-minded when it comes to AI, because we've only just begun to see its capabilities in terms of helping us manage our businesses. And, you're not necessarily going to have a smoothie shaking robot anytime soon. I don't know if Salem's already put some on the line or not yet, but there's definitely going to be some really cool business applications that are going to help you figure out where those thousands of cuts that Taj mentioned, or all those little things done right, as Salem called them, and sort of say, hey, this is an area where you're losing out on your business and where you should focus some of your effort rather than just staying focused on those traditional metrics.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about efficiency. I mean, Restaurant 365, you guys are doing a phenomenal job because I think you're helping your customers and our customers jointly do more with less. So Salem, in terms of your accounting team, how big is it? How many people roughly?
I have 5 people internally.
Okay, got it. And so it in terms of the time savings, do you want to talk a little bit about that and the value of how Restaurant 365 assists the efficiencies of monthly closes and the like? Because I want us to talk about some staffing challenges. That's a question.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's a great theme for today, talking about efficiency and profitability. I mean, efficiency ties into a lot of, everything that we're talking about here and what we're doing. We really need to be efficient with our time, because the more efficient we can be with our time, the more we can focus on the important stuff, right? The customer service, the quality, everything like that. And so that's the bread and butter of our business. That's how our employees feed their families. That's how we grow as a company. So we want to spend less time on the administrative and on the tedious stuff. So the more that we can automate things, use AI, be efficient is important. And so specifically with Restaurant 365, I just love how Kevin mentioned this earlier, but it was truly built for the restaurant industry. I mean, when I was servicing clients in the restaurant industry as a CPA, I was using a tool that not many people would know, but it was very specific for accountants, and accountants only platform. And when I went to go compare Restaurant 365 against some of the other bigger names out there, QuickBooks, NetSuite, Sage Intacct, et cetera, I just really felt like, after doing a very thorough analysis, that this was the tool that was going to really help me scale and scale efficiently. So it's a perfect out of the box solution for restaurant operators. And we're able to do so much at our fingertips. We're automated our biggest expenses with our prime costs. Obviously food is the biggest one. Whether you're with Cisco or US Foods or any other big provider like that, the invoices just can come right in. You can classify everything, you can set up rules, you can set up alerts, so you're doing everything live. You're getting the POS data live. It's so easy for me to look at yesterday and see, yesterday were we short or over on cash? Is all the money making it to the bank? Is everything reconciling automatically, like with the bank, where as money's coming in, it's getting cross-referenced against the POS data that shows exactly what the deposit was supposed to be and what the manager entered in. And so we're just really able to button up operations by being efficient with a tool like that.
Yeah. So efficiency is such a broad term. It's probably more appropriate to kind of talk about productivity, because I mean, there have been studies that say on average 20% of the workforce in the back office, they spend time looking for information that already exists or recreating information that already exists. So if you think about 20%, I mean, this is like Harvard studies, time and motion studies. It's like 1 in every 5 days. So how much are you paying your team? And wouldn't you rather have them spend it based on actionable insights and decisions that are driven by, true data and accurate information, so you can make smarter, faster decisions? I think end of the day, that's really what we're talking about. So now transition to your front of house staff, your teams at all of your 28 tropical smoothies. Have you faced any challenges with productivity or hiring the right people? This is a question that came across. Great question, about the pitfalls of staffing in quick serve. How has Serve overcome those challenges? Obviously, that's post-COVID, but maybe some of those learnings are going to continue on forward.
Yeah, Taj, when you mentioned the 20% wasted in productivity, I mean, that's an important stat. I think I would have guessed higher. I would have really guessed higher. So that actually surprises me as low. But I think one thing that you didn't touch on that's probably a statistic out there is how much of that is contributing to turnover, and how much of that is contributing to employees not enjoying their job, right? I mean, the goal for me is to add value for myself, for my company, for my team, and I want all my employees kind of doing the same thing. So that's a big theme for us, is like, we don't want to recreate the wheel. We want to make sure that we're always improving things and leveraging technology where we can, because it makes their job more fun. Whether you're in the HR department, the accounting department, the administrative department, you want to work on the fun stuff, the sexy stuff, right? You don't want to be sitting and digging for, creating SOPs on how to do, simple things, or sitting and creating a calculation for how to do a triple net reconciliation, when you can just have that data spit out. Now you can go work on the value add work of actually getting the thing improved, right? So tying that in with, my team in the field and my ops team is like, that's part of what we do, right? So we are very much the reason our back office exists, and we're here locally, with my operations team working hand in hand with them, is to make their lives easier, right? So I wanted to take as much administrative away from my general managers and from my people in the restaurants as possible. So I don't want them to have to feel like they have to sit online and schedule interviews for themselves. I don't want them to, have to feel like they have to do a bunch of P&L analysis by themselves to figure out where the gaps are. So the more that we've made things streamlined and efficient for the whole company, with training, profitability, technology, hiring, scheduling, interviews, all that stuff is made their lives, just way easier. And I have people come to me all the time and say, man, at my last company, I had to do all this by myself, and I had to figure all this by myself. And so we've really taken the burden off them so that they can do what they enjoy doing, which is running the restaurant, managing people, interacting with customers, et cetera. So that's part of how we've been able to retain, good people, so we really give them an opportunity to drive value and work on how they can improve the business, improve the cafe, grow in their career, rather than doing the small, tedious stuff that doesn't really add a lot of value that I could have, a piece of technology do for me, or an administrative assistant do for me.
Yeah. So a great example of that is, how much fun is it to create an ASC 842 amortization schedule for all of your leases, to create a right of use asset and a right of use liability, and know what the right entry is? I mean, it's not fun, but technology can solve that. And I think, frankly, it's one of the reasons, from a partnership perspective with Restaurant 365, the industry's ready for modern. The industry's ready for productive tools that can help move the needle and help you focus on building your empire. I don't know if you want to expand on that a little bit more, Salem, but this is about the mundane, the stuff that just bogs people down.
Yeah, no, I mean, and there's always, rules and laws that are changing. You referenced the accounting lease standard that came out, and these are important things that, we have to pay attention to as operators as we grow. And some states and laws are more challenging than others. So the more you can get a better grip on it and manage things with, good payroll systems, good lease systems, good hiring job board systems, good applicant tracking systems, good accounting systems, the more you can get rid of the mundane and make the job more fun. And that's what people really want to do, is they want to add value. They want to be part of an organization that's making a difference. And so that's what we're really trying to accomplish here by focusing on having a strategic vision for how we grow, having good core values, and enabling people to do their best work.
You mentioned a lot of systems there, right? There in a row, right? Accounting, applicant tracking, and personnel management, lease, like it's a whole lot of systems. And I think to Tasha's earlier metric from, the Harvard Business Study, that 20% rings a little all too true when I think about, spending that one day a week compiling all the reports. Like for us, it was Mondays. We operated Mondays to Sundays. So I spent my entire Monday just gathering the data to put it into a report to share with my operators and say, hey, this is what you need to be working on. And we all know this business is measured in seconds and pennies. So if I'm not sending that report out until end of day, we're already down 1/7 of the week without that information, right? So I want to kind of hear from you, Salem. I mean, when you evaluate providers and partners as you kind of build out your tech stack, how important is it to you to think about how nicely they play with others, right? Like R365 and Leasecake, we get along great. We understand the importance and exchange of information, but not everyone's like that, right? Some tech firms out there are very siloed in their offering. They say, hey, we don't really want to play with competitors. Like, how does that factor into your decision-making process?
Yeah, it's a huge factor. I mean, I think we have a few different litmus tests. One of them, when we're evaluating software, right? One of them is exactly what you just mentioned, is how open are they to integrating with others? I don't want to, name names of some of your competitors, Kevin, but we obviously have certain brand mandates sometimes that require us to use certain tools that do the exact same thing of some of the features that Restaurant 365 offers. And while I might prefer to use Restaurant 365 for all of its bells and whistles and only have, again, one less app on my phone or one less website that I have to go to, that's not always the case. And so what's great about my partnership with, both of these companies, Restaurant 365 and Leasecake, is that you guys are open-minded, you play well with others. And I think that's where in the long run, it makes a big difference for longevity of a partnership, because people want to partner with vendors and partners and that are going to make things easier for us, right? All we care about is making our time more efficient. If we can do that, there's a lot of different ways to do that, right? So that's definitely one of the litmus tests is this going to integrate well with our existing tools and systems that we love and we already use? Another big one is, really thinking about how to, a term that I use probably way too much here at the office is like bridging the operational gap, right? So when I'm looking at my team here in the office, it's easy for somebody sitting behind a desk in the computer to just see like, oh yeah, that tool sounds awesome, let's go implement that. It's another to then think about, okay, but how is the employee going to use this? I had a general
Right.
manager come up to me 2 years ago and say to me, like in a very serious way, like, do you realize that I have 16 apps on my phone? And she she was like half joking, but she was serious at the same time. And she was like, I'm gonna have to upgrade my phone. And it kind of put things in perspective for me, like, wow, I really gotta, anytime I add something new, I got to take two things away. So we're even more intentional now about what we add to our tech stack, because we want to make sure that it really adds value. And we want to make sure that it's going to bridge that operational gap, where it's not just a great tool for us to use here at the office to get the metrics that we need, but it's something that our operations team can utilize on a daily basis and not feel like it's another tedious thing that they have to do. Because again, back to my vision from earlier, I'm trying to make their lives easier, get them off the computer as much as possible, even outside the four walls as much as possible if they're in the general manager position, so that they can go do more value add work and grow in their careers.
Who doesn't want easy 365 days a year, right? I mean, you've hit it on the head. There's got to be solutions that just simply work, right? Software that works for you and not the other way around, which is, I think, really what Restaurant 365 has for sure. And one of the reasons we're such a great partner with them is because we're a ASC 842 solution that many of their clients don't have. And Restaurant 365, they don't need to offer it because it's an incredible amount of engineering. It's really hard to make things easy, as we say. And so to build out that ASC 842 component within Restaurant 365, why? So we believe in the spirit of partnership, that's what moves the needle, right? Let's build an ecosystem with people that want to help each other, want to educate each other, and simply, we just really want to get out of your way, right? Just, we're always there for you. So that's wonderful. Here's a question that just came across. What advice, Salem, would you have to others in the industry as it relates to choosing a system, or any profitability reports or things that have really made a difference for you as you look at it grow?
Choosing a system is first part of that question. Choosing a system is kind of what I just mentioned, right? So really establishing for yourself and your team, like, what's a good litmus test of something that you really need and you could really get value out of. Over the years, we've, especially in more recent years, we've eliminated more than we've added, because in the beginning it was always like add. Like, how many things can I add? A new SOP, a new process, a new poster on the wall, a new education training module for one of our managers. So you want to be really conscious of, Pareto's principle, right? The 80-20 rule. What is the 20% of things that we can focus on that are going to make the 80% difference, as opposed to the 80% of things that are really only going to move the needle 20%? And that's critical litmus test for me. And I love that principle. And I've gotten a lot of people in my team to think about that when we're going through things, because there's a lot of nice to haves, right? And so you just really got to bridge the gap between what's a nice to have and what's going to really make a significant impact. So that's kind of my answer on that one. With regard to profitability and, reporting and things like that, is again the 80-20 rule. We've really established kind of like a KPI scorecard that we look at on a weekly basis. We're getting to the point where we're even going to consider a tech stack that might allow us to look at it on a daily basis with some BI technology. But we as a leadership team, we sit down and we look at the key things that we would need to know if we're sitting on an island, and we can only get one fax a day. What would we want to see on that to know the health of our business? And so it's things that you'd expect, right? It's going to be stuff like, what is our customer satisfaction scores? What's our speed? What's our food cost, labor cost? What's our comp transactions, right? Are we bringing new people in the door, or are we just raising prices? There's several, right? But I think we've got it down to like 10 that we really focus on and we really prioritize. And so with Restaurant365, we've done that as well. Like I've created some custom reports where I have a really good RCP that I've created that I love, which stands for Restaurant Controllable Profit. And so I have it formatted in a way where it's really brings my attention to the main drivers in my business, which are, the controllable costs, the things that I can really pinpoint and dig into more and compare side by side which locations are operating at a higher percent of sales than others with certain expense items. And I think when you're able to really make those things pop for you, that's when you can really get to the 20% that makes the 80% difference in your business.
Kevin, there's probably some new features and new capabilities that just kind of came out of this little chat, right?
Yeah, I
maybe
think
that's
so.
what you're unveiling next week.
Certainly going to have some fun stuff to cover next week. Yeah, but I mean, like Salem said, I mean, we talk about the 80-20 all the time, right? Especially as it relates to food costs. And, when you think about a lot of people coming into, saying, where do I even start to begin in terms of analyzing my, my menu performance and my portion sizing and, my vendor contract management and exactly like Salem said, right? Inventory management is king of the 80-20 principle, where you're sort of saying, look, I know 80% of my food costs are only coming from 20% of my purchased items. So before I start worrying about whether my napkin dispenser is one that gives out napkins too easily, or if people are walking out the door with extra straws, or things are ending up on the floor in terms of, disposables and cleaning supplies, like focus on your core ingredients, right? Talk about like your top 4 or 5 most expensive items and make sure that you have those dialed in. And then once you really have kind of honed in your operational efficiency on those items, then you can expand your kind of target. But just like Salem says, control your controllables, right? Like get that RCP dialed into where you know what you're looking at on any given moment before you even start worrying about all the other cool stuff that exists out there in terms of finding those little wins.
That's awesome. Well, listen, before we wrap up, I want to make sure that everybody knows, stay tuned. We've got some upcoming webcasts at the end of this month. And just because it's summer doesn't mean we're on vacation. So please connect with us on LinkedIn. And if you have any topics you want us to cover, reach out to us at marketing@leasecake.com. And let me turn it back to, Kevin, and then we'll have Salem close it out. Kevin, what advice would you want to share with the world, personal or professional, as it relates to what you're doing?
I think the advice I would lend is like I mentioned, being really open-minded to the technology that exists out there. Things have changed really dramatically here in very short order as it relates to AI and a lot of the firms and products that are being built on that kind of backbone of AI. And so I think there was a lot of data that was hard to wrap your head around and get your hands around even 5 years ago, that now with the help of instruction through via AI, like you can figure out how to start pulling some of that stuff together in a way that you really probably couldn't before. And if you don't have the right people on your side that have the chops to kind of connect those dots and start exploring those data connections and surfacing it in a way that helps drive business decisions, find yourself a really good partner who does, whether that's, your CPA firm, your consulting partner, your tech stack vendors, because there's a lot of really exciting data out there that we're really starting to leverage as an industry.
That's awesome. Well, Salem, as a very young CEO, you're in the YPO. You probably met and learned and listened and actually shared advice with other kind of similar like-minded leaders. What advice would you give others in the industry about your story, things to look out for, and things you've learned along the way?
Find a good mentor. I mean, the reason I do this stuff is because I want to give back. I think the cool thing about our industry is that, we want to, help each other, see each other succeed. Sometimes it blows my mind. Sometimes it blows my mind, like when I'm recreating the wheel and saying like, man, this already got to exist somewhere else. Like somebody has already done this somewhere. And so that's where it can be, frustrating. But I think the right people that aren't kind of the mentality of every man out for himself will help one another in the industry. So, you mentioned, this YPO network I'm part of and other things, but I've had great mentors, like not in the beginning. In the beginning, it was more like I just got to do it all myself and figure it out. But then I learned to humble myself a little bit, to reach out, to ask for mentors, to give me advice, to spare 5 minutes, 10 minutes, buy them a cup of coffee, share with me, what advice would you give me and steer me in a different direction. And so I think that's important is, you got to be willing to raise your hand and ask for help and pay it forward.
That is incredibly sage advice. Fantastic. Thank you both for sharing your stories and the value of how do we move the needle across the industry, maximizing profitability and improving productivity and efficiency in the marketplace. Thanks so much, Kevin McTigue and Salem. We will talk to you guys later. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having us. Bye, y'all.